Welcome back to the Beer Junkies. Today we are brewing a holiday spiced amber ale with a special edition of graham crackers. The spice profile with the rich malt profile creates a wonderful beer that you will absolutely want to add to your winter tap list. Let's get started. The water profile for our spiced graham cracker amber ale is 50 parts per million of calcium, 15 parts per million of sodium, 55 parts per million of sulfate, and 65 parts per million of chloride. I want a little bit higher ratio of chloride to help accentuate some of that malt sweetness in the final beer. I also want a little bit more sodium than normal just to help round out that flavor. So to do that, I'm adding calcium chloride, gypsum, Epsom salt, and canning salt. I'll add that to both the sparge water and the Shrike water to get a consistent water profile throughout. Right now I have the Shrike water heating up in the hot liquor tank. So while that's getting ready, let's go over the grains that we're going to be using. For the graham cracker portion of this beer, I add around 16 ounces of graham crackers per 5 gallons, and I layer it into my grist just like you would with corn or flaked oats. Now, the graham crackers will dissolve as you mix them into the mash, so how you add them really doesn't matter. The graham crackers themselves, unfortunately, do not add a whole lot of flavor. It's mostly just sugar that you're going to end up adding with them. So if you want to add that graham cracker flavor to your beer, you're going to have to help promote it with malts and spices. I'll touch on the spices a little bit later on, but for the malt portion, to help promote that graham cracker flavor, I use a base of Maris Otter at a rate of around 55 to 60% of the whole grain bill, and that will build that rich bready flavor. I also add 10 to 12% of both biscuit and honey malt. That biscuit malt will add a baked bread and cookie-like flavor, while that honey malt will add honey, bread crust, and a little bit of toastiness. Now, those two together are the key to me for adding that graham cracker flavor into the beer. To that, I add around 7 to 9% of a light crystal malt. I use around 40 Levabon crystal. That will add a touch of color and sweetness, along with a little bit of caramel and toffee flavors. And then finally, I top it off with 1 to 2% of a chocolate malt, and that will add a little bit of color, a little bit of complexity, and then a very small amount of chocolate flavor. All right. As you can see, I have my graham crackers right on top. These should dissolve right into the wort as we mash in, but just in case, I add plenty of rice hulls just to provide some extra stability. And then below that, we have our grist crushed just like normal. I want it cracked just enough to allow the water to reach the starches, but not so much that the husks themselves are ground too finely and do not add to the stability of the grain bed. This is our mashing setup. We are pulling wort from the bottom of the mash tun, pushing it through our pump, through the Herms coil to keep our mash heated throughout mashing, and then we are continuously recirculating to set up our grain bed filter. We mash this at 156 degrees for about 40 minutes. That higher temperature will promote more alpha amylase activity to create more unfermentable sugars, producing a fuller bodied beer. Once the mashing is over, we will begin to mash out. We just finished mashing, so now with the same setup as before, we are mashing out, pulling wort from the bottom of the mash tun, pushing it through our wort pump, through the Herms coil, and it is still recirculating, but now I'm heating up the hot liquor tank to about 176 degrees, which will heat the mash tun up to about 168 degrees over the course of 15 minutes. We just finished mashing out, so now we are sparging, pulling the wort from the bottom of the mash tun, pushing it through our wort pump, but we've now switched the lever over to direct it towards the boil kettle, which is filling up and heating up to reduce the time it takes to get to a boil. At the same time, we are pulling the sparge water from the hot liquor tank, pushing it through our water pump, and then rinsing the residual sugars left in the grains. We spice this one pretty heavily. Per 5 gallons, we add 1 vanilla bean, 10 coriander seeds, 4 cinnamon sticks, 3/4 of an ounce of sweet orange peel, 7 allspice berries, 1 whole nutmeg, and then 1 clove. Again, that is per 5 gallons, and then we boil this for the last 5 minutes and then keep it in the boil kettle throughout the Whirlpool. The hopping for this style is pretty straightforward. You don't want an American citrusy hop that's going to clash with that spice profile. I found that English hops work really well with this kind of a beer. So I use East Kent Goldings. I add between 12 and 15 IBUs at the 60-minute mark, and I add between 2 and 5 IBUs at the 5-minute mark. I don't want too much bitterness. I don't want it to be a bitter beer, just enough to counteract some of that sweetness. We just got to a boil, so we will boil for 90 minutes. We'll add the hops and the spices in as needed. At 10 minutes, we add in a yeast nutrient, and at 5 minutes, we add in a fining agent. We just finished boiling, so now we are whirlpooling, pulling the wort from the bottom of the boil kettle, pushing it through our wort pump into the tangential input to create a vortex inside the boil kettle to pull all of the proteins, hops, and rest of the trub to the center so we do not push it into the fermenter during knockout. We just finished our whirlpool, so now we are going through knockout, pulling the wort from the bottom of the boil kettle, pushing it through our pump, through our heat exchanger. We're knocking it down to about 62, 64 degrees. We are injecting our oxygen right here, and then we are continuing on down and filling up our fermenter. We ferment this with White Labs' California ale yeast. We ferment at 67 degrees Fahrenheit for about a week, or until 5 specific gravity points away from terminal gravity. We will then raise it up to 72 degrees Fahrenheit for the diacetyl rest. Hold it there for about 48 hours. Then we will cold crash it to 33 degrees Fahrenheit. Hold it there for at least 24 hours. Transfer it to our bright tank, carbonate it to 2.6 volumes, keg it, and then enjoy. This is what we have. It is a beautiful amber color with a slightly off-white head. For the smell, well, it certainly smells like Christmas. There's a lot of the spices coming through. I don't get much of the malt character in the aroma, but it is very spice dominant. For the taste, similarly, it is very spice dominant, but you do start to get some of that malt character on the back end. That malty toastiness, which complements those spices really, really nicely. It's actually a pretty pleasant drink for the kind of beer that it is. If you're over the age of 21, we do not condone underage drinking. Please drink responsibly. Cheers. If you would like to see more brewing content like this, make sure you click that subscribe button right below. And let me know what you'd like to see next in the comments. Cheers.